Kofi was 4 years old, and he believed in hands. A hand meant direction. A hand meant weight. A hand meant you. That afternoon, his aunt's hand held his, and Kofi's small fingers wrapped around her thumb the way he always did, tight enough to feel safe, not so tight that she would scold him. The town was busy in the late heat. The air smelled of charcoal smoke, ripe bananas, and warm dust that rose with every footstep. They had come to the market for cooking oil and cassava. Kofi didn't care about those things. What mattered to him were the sounds. The clack of metal bowls, the bright call of sellers, the sudden laughter that arrived like birds and vanished again. He moved carefully, eyes wide, as if the world might tip over if he stepped wrong. His aunt walked with the confidence of someone who had bargained 1,000 times. She greeted people without slowing down. She carried a cloth bag on her shoulder and a small stack of folded paper money in her wrap. Now and then she looked down at Kofi with the quick, checking glance of a grown-up guarding something precious. "Stay close," she told him. Kofi nodded, because he always nodded. They stopped at a stall where a man poured palm oil into used plastic bottles. The oil glowed orange-red in the light. Kofi stared at it. The way it thickened and slid reminded him of honey, except it didn't smell sweet. A motorbike growled past too close, making the crowd jump. Someone shouted. Another person shouted back. The sound sharpened the air, and for a moment the market felt like a tight knot pulled too hard. Kofi flinched. His grip tightened. His aunt shifted her body to shield him, still talking to the oil seller, still counting money. The noise settled. The knot loosened. Kofi breathed again. Then came the moment that changed everything. Small, fast, almost invisible. A child bumped Kofi's shoulder while running. A basket swung. A woman turned suddenly. The crowd moved in a sideways wave, like grass under wind. Kofi's hand slipped. Not because he let go. Because the world pushed between them. He felt skin, then air, then nothing. He looked up. He saw his aunt's bright headscarf, yellow with green dots, moving away, pulled by the flow of bodies. He opened his mouth. "Auntie." His voice was a pebble thrown into a river. He tried again, louder. "Auntie." A man carrying sacks blocked his view. A woman stepped between them. Someone laughed. Someone argued. The market did not pause to listen to a 4-year-old. Kofi pushed forward, but pushing forward in a crowd when you are small is like pushing against a wall. He felt legs, cloth, baskets, elbows. He smelled sweat and soap and pepper. He blinked hard, trying to keep his aunt's headscarf in sight. Yellow. Yellow. There, gone. Panic rose in his chest, quick and hot. He turned in circles, searching, spinning too fast. The world blurred. The sounds became sharp edges. He felt the urge to cry and hated it at the same time, because crying meant being found by someone, and he wasn't sure who would find him. He ran. He ran toward space, toward any place where bodies weren't pressing against him. He slipped between 2 stalls, brushed past hanging clothes, almost fell over a crate. He heard someone yell at him to slow down. He didn't. The market thinned at the edge. The noise dropped a little, as if a hand had lowered the volume. Kofi reached a side lane where the ground was rough and the shadows were longer. He stopped, chest heaving, and looked back. From here, the market was a moving wall of color and motion. There was no single yellow headscarf. There were many yellows, many greens, many patterns. Everything that had seemed clear before became impossible. Kofi's throat tightened. His eyes burned. "Auntie," he whispered, as if whispering might work better. It didn't. A dog trotted past at the far end of the lane, tail low, nose close to the ground. It didn't look at Kofi. It didn't care that he was lost. It moved as if it knew exactly what it was doing. Kofi watched the dog with the strange attention children give to anything that looked certain. The dog disappeared around a corner. Kofi stood alone in the lane, and the heat wrapped around him like a blanket that wasn't comforting. He took one step. Then another. He walked back toward the market, but the closer he got, the more the crowd seemed like a mouth. The noise felt like teeth. He hesitated, turning sideways, trying to see over bodies that were taller than him, taller than his whole life. He walked away again. It wasn't a decision he understood. It was something his feet chose. He wandered through streets lined with low buildings, some painted, some bare mud brick. Tin roofs flashed sunlight. In a yard, a woman pounded fufu with a heavy rhythm. A baby cried somewhere behind a curtain. A man repaired a bicycle, humming as if nothing bad could happen in a world with tools. Kofi's stomach growled. He pressed a hand to it, surprised by how loud it sounded. At first, he expected someone to recognize him. He expected a voice to call his name the way grown-ups did when he wandered too far from home. But nobody called. People looked at him and looked away. A child alone was not unusual enough to stop the day. Maybe someone assumed his mother was nearby. Maybe they assumed he belonged to another woman in another yard. Maybe they did not want the trouble of asking. The sun moved lower. The light turned softer, but the air stayed hot. Kofi found himself near the bus stop at the edge of town, an open space where old minibuses parked and coughed smoke, where men argued over fares, where horns and shouted destinations overlapped like tangled rope. A bus idled with a rattling sound. Kofi stood near its back wheel, staring at the ground because he didn't know where else to put his eyes. Under the bus, in the strip of shade, 2 dogs lay on the cool dirt. One was small and sandy-colored with sharp ears. The other was bigger, black with a white patch on the chest. Both dogs watched Kofi without lifting their heads. Kofi stared back. He had been taught not to stare at dogs. Staring was a challenge. Staring could bring teeth. But Kofi wasn't thinking in lessons anymore. He was thinking in hunger, fatigue, and the quiet fear that the day was ending and no one had found him. He lowered himself slowly, careful, and sat with his back against the bus metal frame. The dogs did not move. The bus driver shouted at someone. A motorbike buzzed past. A man laughed. Life continued. The strip of shade under the bus felt like a small shelter in a huge world. Kofi's eyelids grew heavy. He fought it, because sleeping felt like surrender. But the day was stronger than him. He nodded forward, woke, nodded again. Then he slept. When he woke, it was darker. The buses were fewer. The arguing voices had thinned. The air smelled of diesel and distant cooking fires. The dogs were still there. The sandy one had moved closer, enough that Kofi could see the dust on its nose. The black one lay farther back, watching everything, alert even while resting. Kofi swallowed. His throat was dry. He whispered, not to the dogs, not to anyone in particular, "I want to go home." The sandy dog's ears twitched. It didn't understand the words, but it understood the sound, soft, broken, tired. A third dog appeared from the shadows, stepping into the dim light like a careful thought. This dog was older. Female. Her fur was dark brown with grey around the muzzle. Her eyes were steady, almost calm in a way that felt unnatural in the street. She paused, looking at Kofi as if measuring him. Not like prey. Not like friend. Like a question. The sandy dog shifted, almost eager, then stopped when the older female made a small sound, low, brief. Not a bark, not a growl. A signal. The sandy dog settled again. Kofi watched all of this, and something in him, some part that used to run to adults for answers, went quiet. The older female stepped closer, sniffed the air near Kofi, then took one step back and Saturday. Her posture said, "I see you. Don't do anything foolish." Kofi's heart hammered, but he stayed still. He copied what he had seen the dogs do all day. He became quiet. The older female blinked once, slow. Then she lay down, placing her head on her paws. It felt, in that moment, like permission. Kofi's shoulders loosened by a fraction. He leaned his head back against the bus frame and let his eyes close again, not fully sleeping, just resting inside the thin safety of being ignored by danger. That night, Kofi learned his first rule of dog life. If you want to survive, you must learn how to exist without being noticed. Morning came early and hot, like someone had thrown a blanket over the town. Kofi woke stiff and confused. For a moment he thought he was at home on a mat, and relief flooded him so hard it almost hurt. Then he opened his eyes and saw the bus wheel, the dust, the dogs. The relief broke apart. His stomach cramped with hunger. His lips felt cracked. He licked them and tasted dust. The sandy dog stood and stretched, shaking out its legs. The black dog yawned and looked away. The older female, the one with the grey muzzle, was already awake, watching the road. People began arriving. A man slapped the side of a bus and shouted a destination. A woman balanced a basin on her head. The town woke in pieces, noise assembling itself like a puzzle. Kofi stood slowly, legs trembling. He looked around, searching for the yellow headscarf. It was a stupid hope, but it was the only hope he had. No yellow. No auntie. Just buses and dust and strangers. He made a small sound in his throat, the beginning of a cry, then swallowed it down. Crying would not bring his auntie here. Crying would only make him visible in a way that could be dangerous. He watched the older female dog instead. She stood and began to walk, not fast, but with purpose. The other dogs followed. Not like pets following an owner, like a small group following a leader who knew where shade and scraps could be found. Kofi hesitated. Then he followed too, a few steps behind, careful not to get too close. They moved along the edge of the road, then cut into a side street where broken walls created narrow corridors of shadow. The older female paused at corners, listening, sniffing. She didn't rush. She didn't waste energy. Kofi copied her pauses. He listened too, though he didn't know what he was listening for. They reached a place behind a row of small shops where trash was piled in a shallow ditch. Flies hovered. The smell was sharp, sour, and promising. The dogs spread out, noses working. Kofi's stomach pulled tight. He saw a banana peel with a little soft fruit still clinging. He stepped toward it. The sandy dog saw it too and moved faster. Kofi froze. He had never fought for food. At home, food arrived when grown-ups said it was time. Here, food belonged to whoever could take it. The sandy dog grabbed the peel and retreated, chewing quickly, eyes bright. Kofi's throat tightened. His eyes stung again. The older female watched the scene without moving, then looked at Kofi. Her gaze was not soft, but it wasn't cruel either. It said, "This is how it is." Kofi looked down and spotted something else. A small piece of bread crust, dry and hard. He picked it up. The black dog approached, sniffed, then stopped, waiting. Kofi held the crust close to his chest. His hands trembled. He looked at the dog's face. The dog's eyes were calm, but hunger lived behind them like a quiet fire. Kofi remembered last night, how the dogs had allowed him to sleep. How the older female had set the tone. How safety had been made from small permissions. He swallowed. Then he placed the bread on the ground and pushed it toward the black dog. The black dog took it and stepped away to eat. Kofi's stomach growled in protest. He felt stupid. He felt noble and foolish at the same time. The older female's ears flicked. She stepped closer, sniffed Kofi's hands, then turned away as if she had accepted a new fact about him. Kofi didn't know the word for star, but in this town, some people would have called the older female dog Nyota because she always moved with calm certainty in the night and early morning. In Kofi's mind, her name formed anyway, simple, bright, strange. Nyota. He whispered it once. Nyota did not react. Dogs didn't react to names the way humans did. They reacted to tone, to intention, to the shape of a moment. Nyota led them onward. They found water at a cracked pipe where a thin stream dripped into an old plastic bowl left on the ground. The sandy dog drank first. Then the black dog. Nyota waited, watching the street. Only after the others drank did she lower her head. Kofi knelt beside the bowl and stared at the water like it was a miracle. He reached a hand toward it, hesitated, then scooped a little into his mouth. It tasted of metal and earth. It was still water. It was still life. When he finished, he sat back, breathing slowly. Nyota looked at him. And Kofi understood, not with words but with instinct, that there were rules now, rules made of survival instead of family. Rule 1. Don't take first. Rule 2. Don't make noise. Rule 3. Learn the routes. By midday, the heat became heavy again. Nyota guided the pack under a raised wooden platform behind a shop where shade pulled thick and cool. They curled up, resting. Even hunger rested, because hunger had no choice. Kofi lay at the edge, not fully inside the circle of dogs, but close enough to feel less exposed. He stared at Nyota's grey muzzle. He watched her chest rise and fall with slow breaths. Her body was lean but not weak. Old but not broken. Kofi thought of his auntie's hand. He missed it so hard that it felt like missing a piece of his own body. But Nyota's presence, quiet and steady, pressed a different kind of lesson into him. Hands could disappear. Rules did not. Kofi closed his eyes and tried to sleep, holding on to that. By the 5th day, Kofi stopped counting mornings. Time in a home has edges. A pot that boils, a mat that waits, a voice that calls you when the sun is low. Time in the street has no edges. It is just heat, shade, hunger, and the slow learning of what keeps you alive. Nyota led them through town like she was following invisible writing. At first, Kofi believed she was simply lucky. She always turned into the right alley. She always arrived at the back of the right shop after the workers had tossed scraps. She always found shade before the sun grew cruel. Then Kofi began to understand that Nyota wasn't guessing. She was reading. The town, to Nyota, was covered in messages. Not letters. Not words. Scent. Kofi started noticing it too, not like a dog, but close enough that it frightened him. He noticed that the road near the bus stop always smelled of diesel, old rubber, and the sharp sweat of men who argued. He noticed that near the fish stalls the air held salt, rot, and the sour tang of flies. He noticed that some alleys smelled of soap and clean water, and those were the alleys where people lived who washed often and chased dogs away quickly. And he noticed the smell of danger. It came in many forms. Sometimes it was a man with alcohol on his breath, sweet, fermented, and bitter at once, walking with unsteady rage. Sometimes it was the smell of metal and oil that belonged to a workshop where dogs were beaten for stealing. Sometimes it was the scent of fear itself, the sudden sour sweat of a pack animal cornered, the sharp urine of a dog that had been caught once before and would not be caught again. Nyota avoided those smells without drama. She would pause at a corner, nose lifted slightly, and then turn away as if she had read a sign only she could see. Kofi began to copy the pauses. He began to stop before a street. He began to listen before he stepped into light. He began to learn which sounds meant nothing, children shouting, women calling, and which sounds meant trouble. A stick tapping, a rope dragging, a boot scuffing in a way that said someone was searching. When hunger grew sharp, Kofi became quieter. When fear grew sharp, Kofi became still. One afternoon, the sandy dog, Kofi had started thinking of him as Tico, because his movements were fast and twitchy like a small drumbeat, snapped at Kofi for getting too close to a bone. Teeth flashed, and the sound wasn't loud but it was clear. Kofi fell back, palms scraping dust. The black dog, Bala, heavy-boned, calm-eyed, stood between them without barking. Not a threat, exactly. A reminder. Nyota watched. Kofi's cheeks burned. He wanted to cry from humiliation more than pain. He wanted to shout, "I'm not trying to steal from you, I'm starving." But shouting had no place here. So Kofi did something that surprised even him. He lowered his head and backed away, slow, respectful, the way he had seen young dogs do when they had crossed a boundary. Tico huffed, still tense, then returned to chewing. Nyota's ears flicked once. A small signal. Kofi understood. He had passed a test. Not because he was brave. Because he had learned manners that kept teeth out of his skin. That night, Kofi followed the pack farther than usual. They moved toward a quieter part of town where houses were spaced wider and gardens existed behind walls. The air smelled of damp soil and leaves. It smelled, to Kofi, like a memory of the village after rain. At one wall, Nyota stopped. She sniffed a crack near the ground, then pushed her nose into it. A faint breeze carried a smell that made Kofi's stomach clench. Cooked rice, beans, and a meat stew simmered with spices. The smell was so rich it almost hurt. Nyota waited. Kofi waited too, though he didn't know why. Then, like clockwork, a door opened inside the wall. A woman stepped out with a bucket and poured leftover water into a small trench beside the garden. The water ran in a thin stream, carrying bits of soap and food. Nyota moved, not rushing, just stepping forward and drinking from the stream as it passed. The woman saw her and snapped her fingers, scolding. Nyota lifted her head once, met the woman's eyes, and then backed away, calm. She had taken what she needed and left before the scolding turned into stones. Kofi watched, amazed. This was not stealing. This was timing. This was survival without begging. When the woman went back inside, Nyota turned and walked away, leading the pack toward another shadowed lane. Kofi followed, but as he walked, he realized something frightening and true. If he stayed with these dogs, he would not die quickly. But he would become something else. He would become a boy whose life was measured in roots and scraps. A boy who smelled danger before he saw it. A boy who didn't call out for help because help was not part of the system anymore. He lay down that night in their shelter and listened to the dogs breathe. And he tried, hard, to remember his auntie's yellow headscarf. He tried to hold the color in his mind like a candle. But the street kept blowing wind at it. The dry days came like a punishment. The air grew dusty and thin. The sun felt closer, as if it had leaned down to watch suffering better. Even the nights were warm, and Kofi woke with a dry mouth and a tongue that felt too big for his mouth. Water became the center of everything. Nyota changed their route. She led them out earlier, before the sun climbed high, when the ground still held a little coolness. They moved quickly through back lanes, avoiding the main road where men with sticks like to stand. Kofi learned to keep up without whining, because lagging behind meant being alone, and being alone meant being prey, not always to animals, but to human impatience. They reached a place near a mechanic's yard where a pipe leaked faintly. Sometimes it dripped into a rusted can. Sometimes it didn't. When it didn't, Nyota didn't waste time. She moved on. Kofi began to notice how the dog's behavior changed when water was scarce. They stopped play entirely. They stopped arguing over small scraps. Their energy turned inward. Even Tico, usually restless, moved with a hard focus. One morning, they arrived at the crack pipe and found nothing. The bowl beneath it was dry. Bala licked the metal anyway, as if hoping taste could become moisture. Tico whined, a thin sound that embarrassed him instantly, and he stopped. Kofi stared at the empty bowl until his eyes blurred. Nyota lifted her head and sniffed the air. Then she turned and walked. The route she chose took them deeper into town, toward a row of buildings where people washed clothes behind walls. Kofi had avoided this place before because women there threw stones without hesitation. Dogs were pests here. Dogs meant dirty paws and stolen soap. But Nyota moved with confidence. She stopped near a corner where a narrow ditch carried grey water away. The water smelled of detergent and dirt, but it was wet. Nyota waited. Kofi waited, learning patience as if it were another muscle. A woman came out with a basin. She dumped the last of the wash water into the ditch, and for a moment the ditch ran like a small river. Nyota drank fast. Bala drank. Tico drank. Kofi knelt, cupped his hands, and drank too. The water tasted like soap and cloth, but it slid down his throat like mercy. Then the woman saw them. Her face tightened. She grabbed a stick and rushed forward, shouting. Nyota didn't panic. She didn't bark. She simply moved, quick, clean, leading the pack away before the stick could land. Kofi ran after them, heart racing. He understood then what Nyota had been teaching him. Water was not just found. Water was taken at the right moment and then abandoned before punishment arrived. That afternoon, Kofi grew dizzy. The world swayed slightly when he stood up. His vision shimmered at the edges. He lay in the shelter with his cheek against the dust, trying to breathe slowly. Nyota watched him. Not with sympathy. Dogs didn't do sympathy the way humans did, but with attention. Kofi heard a sound outside. The faint trickle of something. He lifted his head, thinking it was imagination. Then he heard it again. He crawled toward the shelter entrance, careful, listening. Behind a broken wall, he found a narrow pipe that ran along the ground. It wasn't leaking much, just a slow, stubborn drip that fell into a depression in the dirt and made a tiny muddy pool. Kofi stared at it like it was a secret. His throat tightened with sudden hope. He could drink it now. He could keep it to himself. But the next thought came from somewhere new in him, somewhere shaped by Nyota's rules. If you keep a treasure alone, you become a target. And if the pack weakens, you weaken with it. Kofi turned and hurried back to the shelter. He made a soft sound to get attention, not a shout. A small call. Bala lifted his head. Tico stood. Nyota's eyes sharpened. Kofi pointed, not with a finger like a child asking, but with his whole body like a creature indicating a direction. Nyota rose and followed. She found the drip. She sniffed it, then lowered her head and drank. The others drank too. Kofi drank last, because he had learned the order mattered. Nyota looked at him once, long. In that look, Kofi felt something settle. He wasn't just tolerated anymore. He had contributed. That night, Even hunger felt a little less cruel. Kofi slept with his hands curled near his chest, and for the first time in many days, his dreams held something other than panic. They held the sound of water. The first time Kofi saw her, he thought she was part of the morning. She appeared near the public well just after sunrise, carrying a plastic jerry can. She moved with the practiced strength of someone who had carried water since she was little. Her hair was braided close to her scalp, neat and tight, and her dress was simple, the color faded by sun. She was a child too, maybe 8 or 9, old enough to have responsibilities, young enough to still have softness in her face. Kofi didn't plan to watch her. But he did. Because she looked like someone who belonged somewhere. Because she moved as if she knew where she was going. Kofi stood at a distance with Nyota's pack. The well area was risky. People didn't want dogs near the water. People became loud there, and loud people threw stones. Nyota kept the pack in the shadow of a wall, waiting for a moment when it might be safe to approach the damp ground after others had spilled water. Kofi watched the girl lower her jerrycan, wait her turn, then fill it. Water splashed. The smell reached him, cleaner than ditch water, cooler than pipe drip. His mouth watered instantly. He shifted his weight, restless. The girl turned. Her eyes landed on him. Kofi froze. He expected the reaction he had learned to expect from humans. Suspicion, annoyance, dismissal. He expected her to look away like everyone else. But she didn't. She stared openly, her gaze moving from Kofi to the dogs in the shadow and back to Kofi. Not fear. Curiosity. Kofi's heart hammered. He glanced at Nyota as if asking what to do, but Nyota's eyes were on the well, calculating timing. She did not care about the girl. Kofi looked back at the girl. She tilted her head slightly, like Bala sometimes did when hearing an unfamiliar sound. Then she turned away and lifted the jerrycan onto her hip, walking off. Kofi released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He told himself it meant nothing. But the next morning, she came again. And she looked again. And this time, when her mother's voice called from a distance, sharp, impatient, the girl did something small and strange. As she walked away, she let her hand drift toward the ground and dropped something without looking. It was quick. Casual. Almost careless. But Kofi saw it. When the well area cleared, Kofi crept closer, scanning the ground. A small piece of bread sat in the dust. Not trash. Not moldy. Real bread. Kofi's hands trembled as he picked it up. He stared at it as if it might disappear. Then, instinctively, he looked around for a trap. No rope. No stick. No shouting. Just morning air and the distant clank of buckets. He broke the bread. He offered a piece to Nyota first, placing it on the ground in front of her. Nyota sniffed it, then ate. Bala ate. Tico ate. Kofi ate the last piece slowly, tears stinging his eyes from the simple shock of softness in his mouth. The girl returned a third day. This time, she lingered near the well after filling her jerrycan. She pretended to adjust the cap, but her eyes kept sliding toward Kofi. Kofi stood behind a wall, half hidden, watching. Finally, she spoke, voice low. Hey. Kofi didn't respond. His tongue felt heavy, as if words belonged to a life he no longer owned. She tried again. Little one. Kofi's chest tightened. He looked at Nyota, but Nyota was watching the street, ears tuned for danger, not conversation. The girl took a cautious step closer, stopping well outside reaching distance. What's your name? She asked. Kofi stared. The question hit him harder than hunger. Name. A word that meant being known. His name was Kofi. He knew it. Of course he did. But saying it out loud felt risky, like stepping into light. He swallowed. His voice cracked. He coughed and tried again. Kofi. The girl's face softened. Kofi, she repeated, tasting it like it mattered. She glanced at the dogs. And them. Kofi didn't know what to say. He didn't own them. They weren't his. But he pointed at Nyota and whispered, Nyota. The girl blinked. Star, she murmured, as if she recognized the meaning. Kofi stared at her. He hadn't known she could understand that. She nodded toward the well, then toward a shaded corner near a wall where spilled water sometimes pooled. I can't talk long, she said. My mother. Kofi's eyes flicked to the direction of the voice he'd heard before, stern, sharp. The girl lowered her voice further. "You stay here?" she asked. Kofi hesitated, then nodded. Her gaze traveled over his dusty clothes, the cracked skin near his lips, the way he stood like he expected to be hit. Something changed in her expression, curiosity turning into something heavier. She looked away quickly, as if she had seen too much. Then she said, "Tomorrow," and walked off. That evening, Kofi lay in the shelter and wondered if tomorrow was a promise or a mistake. He didn't trust promises anymore. But when morning came, the girl returned. And this time she brought not just bread, but a small plastic cup with water. She set it down behind the wall, where her mother couldn't see, and walked away without looking back. Kofi approached the cup like it was sacred. Nyota sniffed it first, then stepped back, allowing Kofi to drink. The water was clean. It was like swallowing a piece of sky. Kofi drank slowly, careful not to spill a drop. Then he placed the cup on the ground again, and a strange thing happened. Bala licked the rim. Tico drank too. Kofi watched them and realized the girl hadn't fed only him. She had fed the pack. That day, Kofi smiled for the first time since the market. It was small. It didn't last long. But it existed. The rope man arrived on a bright morning when the town smelled of hot dust and cooking oil. Kofi didn't see him first. Nyota did. Nyota's body changed before the man even came close. Her ears lifted. Her muscles tightened. She stood and stared down the street, still as a carved thing. Bala rose too, slow, heavy, watchful. Tico stopped chewing whatever had found and froze mid-motion. Kofi felt the shift like cold air. He followed Nyota's gaze. A man walked toward the well area carrying a coil of rope and a long stick. His steps were deliberate. His eyes moved constantly, scanning corners, shadows, spaces under carts. He did not move like someone going to buy water. He moved like someone hunting. Kofi's stomach turned. He had seen rope used on goats. He had seen rope used on dogs. Rope meant choking, trapping, dragging. Nyota made a low sound, barely audible, but it cut through Kofi like a knife. The pack began to move, not running, not panicking, relocating. Kofi moved with them instantly. They slipped behind walls, into narrow lanes where shadows lived. They paused, listening, then moved again. Nyota chose routes that broke line of sight, turning corners quickly, never letting the pack be seen too clearly. Kofi's heart hammered. He understood now why Nyota had taught him stillness and timing. In moments like this, survival depended on not being where danger expected you to be. But the rope man was good. He wasn't a fool swinging rope randomly. He noticed tracks in dust. He noticed fresh droppings. He noticed the swirl of flies where scraps had been eaten. He followed patterns. Kofi heard his voice, low, muttering to himself, a man talking to his own patients. Nyota led them into a yard behind a clothes shop where broken crates formed a rough maze. The pack crouched behind the crates, silent. Kofi pressed his back to wood, trying not to breathe too loudly. Footsteps approached. The rope man stepped into the yard. Kofi saw his hands clearly now. Calloused, practiced. The rope coil hung loose, ready to be thrown. The stick rested against his shoulder. The rope man paused, sniffed the air like he was almost copying the dogs. His eyes narrowed as he looked at the crates. Nyota did not move. Bala did not move. Tico trembled slightly, but he stayed. Kofi felt sweat slide down his ribs. The rope man took one step closer. A chicken clucked somewhere nearby. A pot clanged far away. The world kept making sounds that didn't care. The rope man lifted his stick and tapped a crate. The sound was sharp. Tico flinched. The rope man's head snapped toward the movement. Kofi's mind screamed, "Don't." Nyota made a sound, so soft it was almost just breath. Tico froze again, ears flattened. The rope man stared at the crates for a long moment, then smirked slightly, as if amused by his own skill. He shifted his rope coil in his hand. And then, suddenly, he threw it. Not into the crates. Past them. Toward a small gap where Bala's paw had been visible for half a second. The rope loop sailed like a pale snake and landed over Bala's neck. Bala exploded into motion, barking once, deep, shocked. Nyota lunged. Kofi's entire body went cold. The rope man yanked hard, using the stick like leverage. Bala fought, claws digging into dirt, muscle straining. The rope tightened. Nyota snapped at the rope near Bala's neck, teeth working to catch fibers. The rope man swung his stick at Nyota, not to kill, but to drive her back. Nyota dodged, then lunged again. The yard filled with chaos, dust, barking, rope scraping, the rope man cursing. Kofi stood frozen for half a heartbeat. Then something in him, something desperate and animal, took over. He grabbed the nearest thing his hands could find. A broken piece of brick. He didn't aim carefully. He didn't think about consequences. He threw. The brick struck the rope man's forearm with a dull crack. The rope man cursed sharply and jerked back, grip loosening. Bala surged forward, the rope loop slipping enough to give him air. Nyota lunged at the rope again and finally caught it between her teeth. She pulled. Hard. The rope man struggled, but his arm hurt now. His control was imperfect. Bala twisted and backed away, coughing, dragging the rope as Nyota pulled it off. In one violent second, the loop slid free. Bala bolted. Nyota spun and ran after him. Tico shot out of the crates and vanished into the lane. Kofi ran too, legs pumping, lungs burning, fear carrying him faster than hunger ever could. Behind them, the rope man shouted, rage, surprise, pain. But he did not follow far. He had lost the rope loop. He had lost time. And the pack had melted into the town's veins. They didn't stop until they reached a ruined corner behind an old wall where the ground dipped into shadow. Nyota stood panting, eyes blazing. Bala coughed and gagged, then spat and shook his head hard. Kofi crouched, trembling, staring at Bala's neck where the fur was ruffled and the skin looked scraped. Nyota moved close and sniffed Bala, then licked once, quick, practical, checking, calming. Bala leaned slightly into Nyota for a moment, then steadied himself. Kofi's hand shook as if they belonged to someone else. He had thrown a brick at a man. He had done it without hesitation. The realization frightened him more than the rope, because it meant the street had changed him. The pack had changed him. Survival had rewritten him. Nyota turned and looked at Kofi. Her gaze was intense, alert, evaluating, almost fierce. Then she blinked once, slow. Not forgiveness. Not thanks. Recognition. Kofi swallowed hard. He wanted to say something like I didn't mean to hurt him, but he did mean it. He meant to stop him. He meant to keep Bala breathing. He meant to keep Nyota from losing a pack member, because if Nyota lost them one by one, she would lose everything. He was part of the everything now. From far away, Kofi heard a familiar sound, metal bucket clanging near the well, and a girl's voice calling to someone. Asha. Kofi's chest tightened. He wondered if she had seen any of it. He wondered if she would stop coming now that the rope man knew the pack moved near the well. Nyota shifted her stance as if making a decision. The pack began to move again, deeper into the town, away from the well, away from the obvious places. Kofi followed, limping slightly from a scrape on his knee he hadn't felt until now. As they walked, he understood something with sudden clarity. The rope man wasn't a single bad moment. He was a new kind of threat. And from this day forward, the pack would not just be surviving hunger and heat. They would be surviving a person who had decided they shouldn't exist. Kofi didn't get sick all at once. He got sick the way the town got hot, slowly, quietly, until it was everywhere. It began with a heaviness behind his eyes. Then came the thin ache in his joints, like his bones had turned to damp wood. By the second night after the rope man, Kofi woke shaking, teeth clicking softly, even though the air was warm. Nyota noticed. She always noticed. When Kofi tried to stand in the morning, his legs trembled. He caught himself against a wall, breath coming too fast. Bala stepped closer and stood beside him, not touching, but close enough that Kofi felt the dog's steady warmth. Nyota sniffed Kofi's neck and face, then made a low sound that pulled the pack tighter together. It wasn't fear. It was caution. They altered the route again. Not toward the well. Not toward the trash ditch. Toward quieter streets where fewer people threw stones and fewer men walked with rope. Kofi tried to follow, but every step felt heavier. His head buzzed as if bees lived inside it. His mouth tasted bitter. He swallowed and found his throat dry again, even after drinking. The street wavered. Kofi didn't fall at first. He fought it, stubborn, because falling meant being left behind. But by midday, when the sun pressed down like a hand, he sank to his knees in the shade of a wall and could not rise without swaying. Nyota stopped. She looked back at him. Kofi saw something he hadn't seen in her before, not softness, not pity, but the sharp calculation of a leader facing a problem she couldn't bite or outrun. Kofi's body was slowing. A slow pack member was a danger to the pack. But Nyota didn't walk away. Instead, she chose a new shelter, closer, darker, safer, and guided the dogs there in a tight formation, circling back for Kofi as if he were one of their pups. They reached a place behind an abandoned kiosk where the wall had cracked enough to create a crawlspace. The ground inside was cool. The air smelled of old paper, dust, and rat droppings. Kofi crawled in and collapsed. His skin burned. His hands were hot, his feet cold. Sweat soaked his shirt. When he closed his eyes, he saw the market again, bright colors, moving legs, and heard his auntie's voice calling his name as if from underwater. Kofi he opened his eyes and saw Nyota's face. Not his auntie. Nyota. Nyota lay near him, head up, watching the entrance, guarding. Bala lay behind Nyota. Tico paced once, then settled. Kofi's lips trembled. He wanted water so badly it felt like pain. But water wasn't always there. And Kofi had learned a hard truth. Asking didn't create supply. He licked his cracked lips and tried to sleep. That night, the fever rose. Kofi's body shook. His stomach cramped and rolled. He vomited once into the dust and cried out without meaning to, a small, broken sound. Nyota snapped her head toward him instantly, ears forward. She moved closer and sniffed his face. Then she licked his forehead, one quick, rough stroke. Not comfort, exactly. Checking. Cleaning. Keeping him from smelling too much like sickness, too much like weakness. Because weakness attracted attention. Because sickness was a smell that could draw danger. In the dark, Kofi heard footsteps outside. He froze, barely breathing, mind spinning with fear of the rope man. But the footsteps were light. Slow. Familiar. Asha's voice, soft, cautious, reached the shelter entrance. Kofi. She whispered. Kofi tried to answer. His mouth opened, but the sound that came out was only air. Asha crouched near the crack, peering into the shadow. Her eyes widened when she saw him. He must have looked terrible, sweaty, shaking, eyes too bright, skin too pale beneath dust. Asha's face tightened with alarm. Nyota rose instantly, body blocking the entrance, head low. She didn't bark. She simply became a wall. Asha froze, hands lifted slightly as if showing she had no stones, no stick. "It's me," Asha whispered, mostly to Kofi, but also to the dogs. "I'm not hurting." Nyota stared. Bala shifted behind her, ready. Asha slowly reached into her bag and pulled out a small plastic bottle filled with water. She set it down on the ground just outside the crack. Then she slid it forward gently, keeping her hands away from teeth range. Nyota did not move. Asha swallowed. Her voice lowered further. "My grandmother," she said. "Mama Nia, she knows herbs. She helps people. If I tell her, she might come." Kofi's eyes flooded. "Mama," he tried to say, but the word dissolved into a cough. Asha flinched at the sound. Nyota finally stepped back half a pace. Not controller, not permission, but enough for Kofi to see the bottle clearly. Kofi crawled forward with shaking arms and drank. The water hit his throat like relief and made him cry silently, tears mixing with sweat. Asha waited. She watched Kofi drink, then glanced at the dogs. Her gaze moved to Nyota's grey muzzle, and something in her expression softened. "She's protecting you," Asha whispered. Nyota blinked once, slow. Asha backed away carefully. "I'll come back," she promised. "With Mama Nia." Kofi tried to hold onto that promise. But fever made promises slippery. He fell into a restless sleep filled with strange dreams, dogs speaking in human voices, ropes turning into snakes, the well water rising into the sky. By morning, he could barely lift his head. And then, footsteps again. He heard Asha first, breathing hard as if she'd run. Then he heard another sound. The soft scrape of sandals on dirt, steady, unhurried. A voice followed, older, rough with age but calm. "Where is he?" Asha whispered, "Here." In there. Nyota rose. Her body became a wall again. The older woman stopped a few steps away and made a sound with her mouth, like clicking at a stubborn goat, but softer. A sound that carried authority without threat. Nyota's ears flicked. The woman spoke again, low and steady. I am not your enemy, she said, not expecting the dog to understand words, but letting tone do the work. I see you. Kofi's eyes opened a slit. He saw an old woman crouching at the entrance crack. Her hair was wrapped in a faded cloth. Her face was lined deep, but her eyes were sharp and bright. She smelled of smoke, crushed leaves, and something bittersweet. Mama Nia. She looked at Kofi and clicked her tongue. This one, she murmured. Hair's burning. She reached slowly into her bag and pulled out a bundle of leaves wrapped in cloth. She kept her movements careful, respectful, never fast. Nyota watched every inch. Mama Nia held out her open palm, not toward Nyota's face, but near the ground, offering scent. Nyota leaned forward slightly and sniffed. Bitter leaves. Earth. Smoke. No blood. No rope. Nyota's body remained tense, but she did not lunge. Mama Nia nodded once, like a deal had been made. Good, she said. You are wise. Then she looked at Asha. Help me. Together, they slid a small cloth mat toward the crack. Mama Nia spoke softly as she worked, words like a steady rhythm. Kofi, she said. Listen. Don't fight. I will cool you. Kofi couldn't answer. But when Mama Nia touched his forehead, her hand was cool and confident. The touch reminded him, so painfully, of hands from home that he almost sobbed. Mama Nia dabbed his lips with water, then placed a small bundle of crushed leaves in cloth to his chest. The smell was strong, sharp, medicinal. It made his eyes water. Fever doesn't like this, Mama Nia muttered. Nyota hovered close, watching every touch. Bala watched too, head up. Tico trembled at the edge, unsure. Mama Nia worked quickly but gently, checking Kofi's breathing, his skin, his eyes. Then she sat back on her heels and sighed. He needs shade, water, and time, she said. And if the rope man returns, he needs walls. Asha's face tightened. Can we take him? Mama Nia looked at Nyota. Nyota stared back. Silence stretched. Mama Nia finally nodded slowly. We try, she said. She held her palm out again, offering scent, then began to slide her arms under Kofi carefully. Nyota tensed, one sharp breath. Mama Nia paused immediately. I know, she murmured. I know. She waited, letting Nyota choose. Nyota's ears flicked. She sniffed Mama Nia's hands again, then stepped back half a step, still guarding, still uncertain, but allowing movement. That was the moment. Asha and Mama Nia lifted Kofi slowly onto the cloth mat and dragged him out into daylight, keeping him low and covered. Kofi's head rolled to the side. He saw sky. Too bright. He squinted weakly. He saw Nyota follow. Not trailing far behind. Right there. Guarding. Even when people were involved now, Nyota did not release him. Kofi drifted in and out of consciousness as they carried him through back streets. He smelled leaves, smoke, human skin, and dog fur. He heard Mama Nia humming under her breath, a low tune that sounded like an old prayer. And in the fog of fever, Kofi clung to one clear thought. He was being carried. He was not being dragged. Mama Nia's home wasn't a real house, not in the way Kofi remembered houses. It was a small compound behind a wall, with a yard of packed dirt and a few rooms built from mud brick. There was no polished door, no lock that clicked. The entrance was a curtain of cloth that moved with the wind. A house without doors. A place that didn't keep the world out completely, but kept it from rushing in. They laid Kofi on a mat inside the coolest room. The ceiling was low. The air smelled of dried herbs, ash, and something faintly sweet. Bundles of leaves hung from rafters. A clay pot bubbled softly in the corner, steam curling. Kofi slept for long stretches. When he woke, his head felt heavy, but the fire inside him had softened. Water touched his lips again and again. Mama Nia's rough hand wiped sweat from his temples. Asha sat nearby sometimes, quiet, watching him as if he might vanish if she blinked. Nyota stayed outside the curtain. Always outside. Close enough that Kofi could hear her nails scrape the dirt when she shifted position. Close enough that her presence pressed against the room like a guardian spirit. Mama Nia noticed. She didn't chase Nyota away. Instead, she sprinkled crushed herb powder around the threshold, not as magic but as scent, a boundary marker. You can sit, Mama Nia murmured toward the curtain, as if speaking to Nyota like she spoke to a stubborn neighbor. But you don't come in. This is human space. Nyota didn't enter. She Saturday. Days passed. Kofi's fever broke fully. His appetite returned slowly. Mama Nia fed him thin porridge first, then soft rice. Each time he ate, it felt like his body was remembering how to be a child again. But his habits didn't disappear. He ate quietly, scanning the room. He listened to footsteps outside. He flinched when voices grew loud. He moved in short bursts and then froze, like a dog waiting for permission. Mama Nia watched these changes with eyes that missed little. One evening, she sat beside Kofi on the mat, stirring porridge. You live like street, she said. Kofi stared at the bowl. You're not street, she added, voice firm. You're child. Kofi's throat tightened. He didn't know how to answer that. The street had been his teacher. The pack had been his family. Asha leaned in from the side. Where is your mother? She asked gently. Kofi's eyes filled. The market flashed in his mind. Yellow headscarf, noise, hand slipping. He swallowed hard. I don't know. Asha's face fell. Mama Nia sighed, long and low, like she had heard too many stories like this. Town eats children sometimes, she muttered. Not with teeth. With noise. Kofi hugged his knees, suddenly cold. That night, Kofi heard barking outside, not frantic, but alert. Nyota's bark. A deeper bark from Bala. Then Tico's quick yaps. Kofi sat up instantly, heart racing. Mama Nia moved fast, grabbing a stick and stepping to the curtain. Asha followed, eyes wide. Outside, in the yard, a man stood near the wall. The rope man. Kofi knew him immediately by posture, by scent memory, sweat and rope fiber and impatience. He didn't have the rope coil in his hand now, but he held his stick. His eyes scanned the yard. Nyota stood between the man and the house, body rigid, teeth visible. Bala stood beside her. Tico circled, barking in sharp bursts. Mama Nia stepped out, her stick in hand, voice like iron. What do you want? She snapped. The rope man's eyes flicked to her. He smirked. Your dogs are in my business, he said. They bite. They steal. They spread sickness. Mama Nia lifted her chin. They live. Like we live. The rope man spit to the side. They live too much. Someone must clean the street. Nyota growled, deep. The rope man took a half step forward. Mama Nia raised her stick. Not threatening. Warning. This is my yard, she said. You step in, you answer to me. The rope man stared at her, measuring. Behind Mama Nia, Kofi stood in the doorway shadow, trembling. The rope man's eyes caught him. Recognition sparked. The rope man's mouth twisted. That boy, he said. He belongs to someone. Mama Nia's voice sharpened. He belongs to himself. The rope man laughed, short and unpleasant. He belongs to the street. Like them. Nyota's growl deepened. Bala barked once, heavy. The rope man shifted, as if considering whether to push. Then Mama Nia did something Kofi didn't expect. She stepped closer, straight at him, without fear. You want dogs? She said. Take your own hunger. Take your own anger. Don't take what keeps a child alive. Her eyes burned. The rope man's smirk faltered. He glanced at the dogs, 3 sets of teeth, 3 bodies ready. He glanced at Mama Nia, an old woman with nothing to lose. Then he backed away, muttering. This isn't finished, he said, and turned, leaving. Nyota watched until he disappeared. Then she lowered her head slightly and exhaled, a long breath. Mama Nia looked down at Nyota. You guard, she said simply. Nyota blinked once. And in that moment, Kofi understood something new. He wasn't just being rescued. He was becoming part of a place, a house without doors, where humans and dogs negotiated space, where survival wasn't only scavenging, but also standing your ground. The first time Mama Nia let Kofi step beyond her yard, the sun was low and the air was less harsh. Asha walked beside him, carrying a small basket. Kofi moved like he was crossing enemy territory, eyes scanning corners, ears tuning to distant sounds. Nyota followed behind, silent. Bala followed too. Tico stayed back, roaming, always restless, always checking. They walked toward the market area, not into the thickest crowd, but near it, where people moved with purpose and talked in loud, fast tones. Kofi's stomach tightened. Memories hit like stones. Noise. Yellow headscarf. Hands slipping. He slowed. Asha noticed. "It's okay," she murmured. "You're not alone." Kofi didn't fully believe it, but he kept walking because Nyota's presence behind him felt like a wall. Near a small yard, a woman was crying loudly. Men stood around her, arguing. A thin rope hung from an empty stake. Mama Nia was there too, drawn by trouble like smoke draws flies. "What happened?" Mama Nia asked. The crying woman wailed, "My goat. My goat is gone. That was my children's milk." A man shouted, "Thieves. Night thieves. They took it." Another man shook his head. "No, no. I saw strange dogs last night. Dogs are stealing goats now." Nyota stiffened at the word dogs. Balla's ears flicked. Kofi felt the accusation like a slap. Mama Nia's eyes narrowed. "Dogs don't drag a tied goat," she said. "Not unless your rope was already weak." The crying woman pointed at the ground. "Look. Tracks. There. See." Everyone looked down at scuffed dust, half-erased footprints, goat hoof marks, and a messy story of panic. Most people saw only chaos. Kofi saw patterns. He didn't even know he was seeing them until he stepped closer, crouching without thinking. He studied the dirt the way Nyota studied corners. There, goat hoof prints, deep, uneven, showing it had been pulled or forced. Next to them, human footprints, heavier, with a certain stride. And here, another set, lighter, running. And then, something else. A smear in the dust where the rope had dragged, leaving a thin line. Kofi lifted his head slowly, eyes tracking the direction of that line. It led away from the stake, through the yard gate, toward a narrow lane. Kofi stood. He pointed. Asha blinked. "Kofi." Kofi's voice was small but clear. "This way." The men laughed. "A little boy knows goats now." Mama Nia's eyes sharpened. "Let him," she said. "He sees." Kofi began to walk, slow at first, then steadier as the trail became clearer. Nyota followed at his heel. Bala walked on the other side, like a heavy shadow. The men followed, skeptical but curious. The lane narrowed. Dust thickened. The smell changed, less cooking, more earth and old weeds. Kofi paused at a corner and sniffed instinctively, copying Nyota. He smelled goat, sharp, animal, familiar. He smelled sweat. He smelled the faint tang of fear. He moved again. The trail led behind a row of abandoned sheds, toward a patch of scrub near the town's edge. There, tied loosely to a tree, stood the missing goat. Its eyes were wide. It bleated weakly, tugging at the rope. A man stood nearby, startled as the group arrived. He had a knife tucked at his waist. For a moment, everything held its breath. Then Nyota barked, one sharp warning. Bala stepped forward, heavy, silent, teeth visible. The thief's confidence broke. He backed away, hands lifted. "Don't!" he shouted. Men surged forward, grabbing him, shouting. The crying woman sobbed louder, but now with relief. Kofi stood still, heart racing, staring at the goat as if it were proof that his eyes still worked in a human world. Mama Nia placed a hand on Kofi's shoulder. "You found it," she said. Kofi's throat tightened. He didn't know how to respond to praise. Praise felt like a trap, like kindness that could disappear. But Mama Nia's hand stayed. Asha smiled at him, wide, proud. Word spread fast in a small town. By the next day, people were whispering about the boy who followed a trail like a dog. Some whispered it with admiration, some with fear. But either way, Kofi stopped being invisible. And that was both a gift and a danger. Fame in a small town is not gentle. It touches you, and suddenly everyone thinks they can claim a piece. After the goat, people began noticing Kofi more. Women at the well stared. Men in the market pointed. Children whispered and followed at a distance, daring each other to get close to the dog boy. Kofi hated the attention. Attention meant eyes. Eyes meant judgment. Judgment meant stones. Mama Nia understood. She kept Kofi close. She gave him small tasks: fetch herbs, carry water, sweep the yard, things that built routine. Routine was a second kind of shelter. Asha visited often, bringing stories, sometimes bread, sometimes just her presence. Nyota remained a constant shadow near the threshold. Bala stayed too, loyal and calm. Tico came and went like wind, never fully contained. Kofi's body healed, but his instincts remained. He still listened before stepping into open spaces. He still avoided loud voices. He still flinched when he saw rope. And he still looked to Nyota when uncertain, because Nyota had been his first steady rule in a ruleless world. One evening, Mama Nia sat with Kofi under the fading light and spoke carefully. "You can stay here," she said. "But you must learn human ways again." Kofi stared at the ground. "What if my auntie comes?" He whispered. Mama Nia's eyes softened. "If she comes, we speak. We decide." Kofi's throat tightened. Decide. He had not decided anything since the market. Life had decided for him. Hunger had decided. Dogs had decided. Streets had decided. Mama Nia continued, "You have 2 names now." Kofi blinked. 2. Mama Nia nodded toward the yard. "In the market, you were Kofi," she said. "In the street, you became something else. People will call you many things. Dog boy. Shadow child. Tracker." Kofi's cheeks burned. Mama Nia lifted her chin. "But you choose which name lives in your heart." Kofi didn't understand fully, but he felt the weight of it. That night, as the town quieted, Nyota rose and walked toward the gate. Kofi noticed instantly. He followed, stepping into the yard. Nyota stood at the wall, nose lifted, sniffing the night air. Her posture was tense in a way Kofi recognized. She had caught something. A smell. A change. Bala approached too, ears forward. From outside the wall came footsteps, slow, cautious. A figure hovered near the entrance. Kofi's heart jumped. A woman's voice whispered, shaking. "Kofi." The sound struck him like lightning. He froze, body rigid. It was not Asha. Not Mama Nia. It was a voice from before, older, familiar in a way that made his chest ache. "Kofi, where are you?" Kofi's breath caught. He stepped closer to the gate, hands trembling. Mama Nia appeared behind him, calm but alert. Nyota growled softly, not at Kofi, at the unknown presence. The figure outside shifted into the faint light. A woman. Her headscarf was not yellow with green dots. It was different. But her face, her eyes, held something Kofi remembered, even through dust and time and fear. His auntie. She looked thinner, exhausted, eyes red as if she had cried for days. When she saw him, her mouth opened and a sob escaped. "Kofi!" She cried. Kofi didn't run to her. His feet stayed planted as if the ground had grabbed them. Because running to her meant leaving Nyota behind. Leaving Bala behind. Leaving the life that had kept him alive when no hand held his. Kofi stood between 2 worlds. His auntie reached through the bars of the gate, fingers trembling. "Come," she whispered. I searched everywhere." Kofi stared at her hand. Hands. He had believed in hands. But hands had slipped. Mama Nia placed her own hand gently on Kofi's back. "It is your choice," she murmured. Kofi's throat tightened until it hurt. Nyota stepped closer and stood beside him, calm, steady, eyes fixed on the gate. Bala sat behind Nyota. Kofi looked at Nyota's grey muzzle. He remembered the night under the bus. The first slow blink. The permission to exist. The rules. The water. The rope. The fever. He looked at his auntie's outstretched hand. He remembered the market. The warmth. The before. Tears rose in Kofi's eyes, and he did not wipe them away. He took one step toward the gate. His auntie's hand moved, desperate, ready to grab him. Kofi paused. Then he did something small but powerful. He turned his head and touched Nyota's side briefly with his fingers. One quick, gentle touch. A promise. Then he stepped forward again. He reached the gate and let his auntie's hand hold his for the first time in weeks. Her fingers closed around his, tight, trembling. Kofi flinched at first, then forced himself to relax. Nyota watched silently. Mama Nia spoke with calm authority. He stays with me tonight, she said. He is not pulled like a sack. He is not dragged by guilt. Tomorrow, we speak properly. Kofi's auntie nodded quickly, tears streaming. Yes, she whispered. Yes, thank you. Thank you. She looked at Nyota then, eyes wide with the shock of understanding. That dog, she murmured. Mama Nia's voice was firm. That dog kept him breathing. The auntie swallowed hard. Thank you, she said, and though she spoke to Mama Nia, her eyes flicked to Nyota again. Nyota blinked once, slow. Then she turned away as if the conversation was finished. That night, Kofi lay on his mat inside Mama Nia's room. Outside, Nyota lay near the threshold, as always. The air was cool. The town quiet. Kofi stared at the ceiling, heart full and confused. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Whether he would return to his auntie's home. Whether the town would ever stop staring. Whether the rope man would return with more anger. But he knew something true, something he could carry no matter where he lived. He had survived. Not alone. Not by magic. But by learning the rules of another world, rules written in scent and silence and patience. Kofi whispered into the darkness, voice small but steady. Nyota. Outside, the dog's breathing deepened, as if she had heard her name and accepted it as a final gift. Kofi swallowed, then whispered a second name, the one he had never lost, only buried. Kofi. 2 names. 1 heart. And for the first time since the market swallowed him, Kofi fell asleep without fear that the night would take him away again.